Hello. With me is Sam Miller, who is the head of the BBC World Service Trust in India. He is also the author of the award-winning book Delhi, Adventures in a Megacity. And now, with a completely fresh outlook on some of India's well-known buildings and monuments, he's here in London for the launch of his new book, Blue Guide India. Sam, welcome. First of all, I'd like to know from you, what inspired you to look towards India?
Well, I think as a teenager and in my 20s, I wasn't terribly interested in India. I had lots of friends who had been there, and I had Indian friends in London where I grew up. But I actually travelled in the Middle East. I studied Arabic. That was my area of speciality. Then I met someone, the woman who later became my wife, and we travelled in India together. And I think it was a rather lovely way of being introduced to a new place. I wasn't there because I was a tourist. I wasn't there because I had work. I was following someone, really. And that was a very interesting way of making sense of a country. I wasn't committing myself to it in any way. And then, after a while, I realized that this is a place I wanted to live, and I was working for the BBC. I managed to get a job as a correspondent there in Delhi in the early 90s, and that's where it all begins. And I've lived there on and off ever since. Almost 20 years now. I've lived for long patches in London as well, but I feel certainly for the last 8 years Delhi has been my home and will probably continue to be so.
I'm aware of the fact that your new book, Blue Guide India, contains, very detailed information about different cities and states in India. But how is this particular book different from all the other books that have been written about India?
It is essentially a guidebook, but it's different from the other guidebooks. One in that it's a single volume guide to the buildings and monuments of India. So it doesn't talk so much about beaches or shopping or wildlife, though it does mention those things. What's central to it is the culture and heritage of India. And that, for reasons that I don't quite understand, has never been written into a single volume book, which people can use to go and visit different parts of the country. And not just the very famous monuments, not just the Taj Mahal or Jaipur or the Qutub Minar or the Red Fort, but lots of smaller, very interesting places. And for that reason, I hope it's something that will be of interest to Indians, people who've lived in India all their life, as well as people who are travelling there for the first or second or third time.
What challenges did you face while working and researching for this particular book of yours?
I mean, it's an enormous task, as anyone would recognise. India is so large and has such a rich cultural, historical heritage that I felt at times I didn't stay long enough in lots of places. There are places I loved, and I just knew I had to move on to the next place. So that was an enormous challenge. It was, in the end, the sheer scale of it, to travel to all of these states, to see all the major monuments and most of the minor ones.
Which city in India is your favourite, and why?
Well, it has to be Delhi now. When I first moved to Delhi in the early 90s, I hated it. I thought it was an awful, small-minded, mean little city, and I loved Bombay. About 10 years ago, I began to understand.
I've always wondered about one thing. Indians sometimes find their own system upsetting, probably because of the way certain things run, certain things happen. But when people from here travel to India, they bring about a very different light. I mean, it's like enjoying every little thing that probably Indians might not be fond of. And sometimes when Indians are going about and seeing all those little small places in their own country, they often have to, inside their mind, refer to the writings and the artworks to like a particular thing. Oh, it's that person who came from London who loved it, so we are also loving it. It's that kind of a thing. Why is it that people from here are able to bring about that uniqueness or kind of turn everything into a piece of art when you talk about India?
It's a complicated one, that. I think it's an important question. I think the answer has to be sought in part from Indians who feel like that. My own view is that for me, it's about bringing a fresh eye. And an eye that doesn't feel implicated in what's happened. I think what you're describing, how some Indians feel about their country, I think they feel a sense of responsibility for the things that are wrong, that they might be embarrassed or guilty about them. Obviously, if I turn up, I don't feel that. I just feel interest and explanation. That changes, though, because you must remember I've been living on and off there for 20 years, and so I feel responsible in a way. I feel apologetic if things don't work well. I want foreigners, for instance, who turn up in India to like it rather than not caring. I care now. But in the end, I can't answer that. I think you need to throw that back to Indians who feel so almost emotionally involved or upset about things in their country that they can't pull back and come to the kinds of judgments other people can.
Do you think one of the reasons why this happens is because people who are living in places like London, they kind of get bored of the perfection that exists in life here?
I don't know that it's perfection. I think it's there, for me, in London, a lot of the time, there's a lack of life. That I walk along the streets and there's nothing much happening. And it's very rare you get that in India. So I'm not quite sure it's perfection. I don't think many Londoners would describe London as perfect. There's a lot wrong. But particularly in the winter months when the days are short, it can seem like a place where one should hibernate. And I love London in the summer. London in the winter, for instance, I find less appealing.
Maybe some people love it because of the kind of beauty that this place has. And do you think that's one of the reasons?
I mean, there are wonderful areas of London. Where we're sitting now is very close to the river, and you can go down to the river and have wonderful vistas, and amazing at sunrise or sunset. The river, as you know, for instance, in Delhi, is not a place anyone would ever go to for sunrise or sunset.
What was the most memorable moment while you were working for this particular book?
I'll tell you the memory that has come to me. It may not be absolutely the kind of answer you wanted. I remember going to Dungapur, which is in southern Rajasthan. It's a beautiful palace, and inside the upper part of the palace is this bizarre collection hidden behind a door of 18th century pornographic pictures that had been commissioned by the Maharaja. And I went and saw them, and then I went outside and I walked in, presumably dazzled by what I'd seen, into an overhanging eave, a bit of stonework, and I hit my head and I had blood pouring down my face. And I've got this picture of me that I was actually showing to my family earlier today, that I took after had this accent, and I thought it was quite funny, or there was an irony to it, that I'd just been looking at this 18th century pornography, and there 2 minutes later my face was covered in blood, and that this was some sign from the heavens or something like that. Yeah.
When you talk about cultural environment in India, have you now, after being in India for quite some time, begun to enjoy the culture and the kind of sounds and the kind of dance? And have you really seeped into it, or you just still have a very behind the mirror look to all those things?
I think there are bits of it. I think I don't trust anyone who says that, even an Indian for that matter, who says they're into it all, because, you know, just in the field of dance or just in the field of music, there are so many traditions from different parts of the country, of classical and folk traditions, traditions that draw from the West, traditions from which the West is now drawing. That I kind of defy anyone to say they're really seeped in it. I think there are little bits that one seeps oneself in it. I'm very keen, for instance, on sort of Bengali folk music, which of the kind that's been that's come via the West partly. I'm very interested in Indian writing in English. I'm quite interested in Hindi writing in from India. So one of the ways I tried to learn Hindi was to read Prem Chand. But I am an outsider in the end. I'm not going to pretend I'm otherwise.
With all the kind of beauty and culture that India talks about displaying to the outer world on an international stage, do you think India is in a big way lacking a lot for women, the situation that most of the women have in India? What do you think about that? And did that in any way come in relation with your working for the book? And have you ever been influenced by that in any way?
Yeah, I mean, I think from my very earliest trips to India, which were mainly as a journalist, I was looking at major social issues in India, and gender inequalities are a huge part of that. In my Delhi book, I write quite a lot about, for instance, the way women are treated in Delhi, which, particularly in public, and particularly if you're a poor woman, or women from particular areas of the country, can be appalling. And I don't think those issues are addressed enough. I'm currently working for the World Service Trust, part of the BBC, which is trying to use the media to help deal with poverty in the broadest sense and improve the health of the poor.
How do you like living between London and India? What is the kind of feeling that you have when you land Delhi, and what is the exact kind of feeling that you have when you land in London?
I mean, I must be showing my Britishness in my answer to this question, because the answer is it depends on the time of year. If I'm coming to London after the heat of May and June in Delhi, I'm so happy to be coming here. If it's the winter time here and I'm going off to Delhi or to India, then I'm so happy to be going out there. I love being able to move between both countries. They're both very important to me personally. They're both, part of my being almost now after all of these years. And there are a lot of where one cares about being are the people who are in them, and there are people who are very close to me in both countries, and I think that's probably the most important thing, even more important than this great building or that great building. It's those people that are critical to that. But yes, I feel comfortable in India now. I've lived there for so long, but I never feel bored there. And I think that's what's extraordinary. And it relates to what I was saying about it being a continent, really, than a country. And one can never know all about Europe or all about Africa, so why would one ever know all about India? I don't, and I never will, but I want to know more.
Well, that's wonderful. All that I can make out is that both the countries have completed your existence. Thank you very much. It was lovely speaking to you.